This happened about 3 years ago. I was 24 and had just bought my first house, a fixer-upper out in the country, because it was literally all I could afford. I knew it was going to be a project, but I figured I'd rather have something I could actually own than keep throwing money at rent. The place had been empty for a while, but structurally it was solid. Just needed cosmetic work, new floors, that kind of thing. I spent the first month just cleaning. The previous owners had left all kinds of junk in the barn out back. Old furniture, rusted tools, boxes of stuff nobody wanted. I kept meaning to haul it to the dump, but I kept putting it off. There was always something else to do inside first. Anyway, the first weird thing happened on a Saturday. I was in the barn sorting through some of the junk, trying to figure out what was worth keeping. There was this old wooden chair, really beat up, missing an armrest. I remember thinking it might be good firewood. But underneath it was a box of kids' toys, little plastic cars, a few action figures, one of those old Viewmaster reels. I pulled out the Viewmaster and held it up to the light. The reel inside was some nature scene, mountains or whatever. I almost tossed it, but then I noticed something else in the box. A small wooden figure, crudely carved. Looked like a person maybe, but the proportions were all wrong. Arms too long, head too small. It was painted black, or maybe just stained dark. I remember holding it and thinking, this is kind of creepy. I put it back in the box and moved on. That night I was in the living room eating takeout, watching some show I wasn't really paying attention to. I heard something from the direction of the barn. Not loud, just a sort of thump. I figured it was the wind or maybe an animal. The barn was old, drafts got in, I didn't think much of it. The next morning, I went back out to the barn to grab a tool. The box of kids' toys was still there, but the wooden figure was sitting on top of it. Right on top, like someone had placed it there. I know I put it back in the box. I remember that clearly because I had to lift a broken toy truck to get it underneath. But there it was, sitting on top like a display. I told myself I just forgot, that I'd taken it out again and didn't remember. It was a long day, I was tired. I put the figure back in the box and went about my work. A few days later, my friend Mark came out to help me with the floors. I mentioned the barn junk to him and he said we should just rent a dumpster and clear it all out. I told him about the weird little figure, kind of joking, and he laughed. Probably some old creep made it in his basement, he said. I agreed, it was just junk. But I kept noticing things after that, little things. Tools I'd left in one spot were in another. The door to the barn would be open in the morning, even though I knew I'd closed it. I blamed the wind, or my own forgetfulness. I was in a new place, not used to the routines yet. That's what I kept telling myself. The thing that got to me, though, and I still don't have an answer for this, was the morning I went out to the barn and found the wooden figure sitting on the workbench. Not in the box, on the workbench, where I'd been working the day before, and it had been turned to face the door. I know, it sounds like a prank. But there was no one else there. Mark had left 2 days earlier. I was alone on the property. I didn't have roommates. No one had a key except me, and I hadn't given one to anyone. I picked up the figure. It was just wood, grainy, dark, roughly carved. I turned it over in my hands, trying to see if there was a maker's mark or anything. Nothing. Just a crude little person with those 2 long arms. I put it back in the box, and I took the whole box to the dump that afternoon. I threw it in with the rest of the junk and watched it get crushed by the compactor. That should have been the end of it. But a couple of weeks later, I was in the barn again, clearing out the last of the stuff, and I found the figure on a shelf I hadn't even touched before, just sitting there. I didn't tell anyone this part because, honestly, I thought I was losing my mind. I picked it up again, and this time, I walked it out into the field behind the barn. I threw it as far as I could into the tall grass. I stood there for a minute, watching where it landed, making sure I saw it disappear. Then I went inside and tried not to think about it. I was in the kitchen that evening, making dinner, and I kept looking out the window toward the barn. The sun was going down, it was getting dark. I told myself I wasn't going to go back out there. I wasn't. But just before I went to bed, I had to let the dog out. My dog, Max, he's a lab mix, pretty fearless normally. I opened the back door and he ran out, and I stood there, waiting for him to do his business and come back, except he didn't. He started barking, not his usual, hey, there's a squirrel bark, something different. Stressed, kind of panicked. I called him and he wouldn't come. He was standing at the edge of the field, staring at the tall grass. I walked out there. I had a flashlight. I could see the spot where I'd thrown the figure. I'd marked it in my mind. But when I got there, Max was just standing over a patch of flattened grass. And in the middle of that flattened grass was the wooden figure. I didn't touch it. I grabbed Max by the collar and went back inside. I locked the door. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I went out there in the daylight. The figure was gone. The grass was standing up again like no one had ever been there. I don't know how it kept coming back. Maybe someone was messing with me, some neighbor I didn't know, playing a long game. But the property was remote. The nearest house was half a mile away. The barn was old and drafty, but there wasn't anywhere to hide. I checked. I never found out who carved it or why it kept ending up in places I knew I hadn't put it. I thought about burning it, but the thought of lighting it on fire and seeing it just sitting there in the flames, I don't know. Something about that felt worse. I still live in the house. I finished the renovations, but I don't go in the barn after dark, and I never go into the field at all.